I first heard the name Snallygaster spoken as a warning, not a story. It came from an old man at the edge of the Blue Ridge, his voice low, careful, like saying it too loudly might remind the hills that people still remembered. He didn't describe a creature at first. He described absence. Livestock found drained and collapsed, not torn apart. Paths avoided by deer, birds lifting suddenly from treetops for no visible reason. Sound behaving incorrectly, echoes returning too early or not at all. Only after that did he give it a shape. Wings that didn't beat so much as stretch the air, a body that looked assembled from older things, a beak too long, lined with something that clicked when it opened. But he emphasized one detail above all others: it hunted from above and below. The Appalachians have a way of feeling older than time should allow. The ridges roll like the bare backs of buried giants, and when fog settles into the valleys, it doesn't drift, it pours. The land doesn't just hide things, it keeps them. I didn't come looking for a monster. I came because entire sections of forest had gone quiet in a way that didn't match fire, disease, or migration. Silence with structure. Gaps shaped too deliberately. The first night I camped near a creek that ran red with iron-rich sediment. The water tasted metallic even after boiling. As the sun went down, the ridge line darkened unevenly, like something large shifted position just beyond visibility. That's when I heard the sound, not a surge, not a screech, a wet inhale, drawn out and patient, followed by a clicking release like bone tapping against bone somewhere high above the trees. The air pressure changed. My eyes popped. The fire dimmed without wind. Shadows stretched uphill instead of down. I remembered thinking, very calmly, that whatever the Snallygaster was, it wasn't flying through the sky. It was using it. And somewhere above the ridge, something turned, slowly, toward where I stood. By morning, the forest had reorganized itself, not visibly, not dramatically, but in the way a room feels after someone dangerous has left it. Objects in the same places, yet nothing willing to relax. My campfire had burned down to a clean ring of ash, untouched by scavengers. No tracks crossed it, no insects worked the perimeter. The silence had structure now. I followed the creek upstream. The iron smell intensified, not like blood, but like old tools left too long in rain. Rocks along the bank were scored with long, shallow grooves, evenly spaced as if something had dragged a serrated edge across them without urgency. The locals had used another word the night before, spoken only once: glass eater. At first I thought it metaphorical, mountain exaggeration. But as the sun climbed, I found trees with bark stripped away in vertical sheets, the exposed wood beneath dulled and frosted, like it had been etched rather than torn. Sap leaked slowly, thick and dark, coagulating before it could trip. Above me, the ridge crested sharply, and above that, the air distorted, not movement, compression. I stopped walking. The pressure change returned, subtle but unmistakable, like altitude sickness without altitude. My breath felt delayed, arriving a fraction of a second after I tried to draw it in. Sound flattened. The creek's rush softened into something padded, distant. That was when I understood what the old man meant. The Snallygaster didn't patrol the sky. It occupied layers of it. Something passed overhead, not casting a shadow, but dimming light unevenly as if the sun were being viewed through warped glass. Leaves trembled without wind. My pack straps creaked as if pulled upward by invisible fingers. Then came the smell, sharp, acidic, ozone mixed with decay. I looked up. The sky wasn't empty. It was bent. A long shape moved against the blue, not flapping, not gliding, but unfolding itself incrementally. joints adjusting mid-air like a machine discovering its range of motion. Membranes stretched between elongated supports, semi-translucent, veined darkly as if filled with something thicker than blood. The beak, if that's what it was, opened slightly. I heard the clicking again, closer now. And beneath my feet, the ground vibrated, not from impact, but from anticipation. The Snallygaster wasn't hunting yet. It was mirroring, and it had noticed me. I didn't run. Not because I was brave, because the forest itself wouldn't allow it. Movement felt negotiated now. Every step required agreement from the ground, from the air, from whatever invisible gradient the Snallygaster had imposed over the ridge. I moved anyway, angling downslope where the trees grew tighter and the canopy knitted itself into something almost protective. Almost. I found the first carcass near a collapsed rail fence. A mule deer, or what had once been one, lay on its side with legs folded neatly beneath it, as if placed. There were no tears, no exposed organs, no sign of struggle. The hide was intact, too intact, pulled taut over a frame that no longer fully existed. I knelt. The eyes were gone, not removed, but emptied. The sockets held a thin, cloudy residue that reflected light oddly, like ground glass suspended in gel. When I touched the flank, my fingers sank slightly, meeting resistance, then yielded without warmth. Whatever the Snallygaster fed on, it wasn't meat, it was pressure, density, the internal architecture of living things. I stood quickly when the clicking started again. This time it came from multiple directions, not echoes, positions. The sound traveled through the trees in staggered intervals, bouncing ahead of itself, arriving before it should have. I realized then that the creature's presence warped distance itself. It didn't need to be close to feel close. I moved on, following signs the local had never mentioned. Marks burned into stone, shallow circular impressions in the soil, scorched but not charred, like heat without flame. In one clearing I found feathers, long, brittle and translucent, snapping into powder when touched. They smelled faintly of acid and rain. Human signs came next. A boot heel snapped cleanly off, resting upside and upright as if placed intentionally. A torn map pinned to a tree with a rusted nail, roots circled and crossed out obsessively. A notebook swollen with moisture, its pages fused together except for one that had been pressed flat and dried deliberately. On it, written in shaking block letters, "It drinks the sky first." I didn't hear the Snallygaster land. I felt it. The ground bowed inward slightly, not from weight, but from atmospheric displacement. Leaves flattened, my chest tightened. The forest inhaled all at once and held it. Something massive passed between the trees without breaking branches. I didn't run. I watched shadows crawl uphill, rearranging themselves into angles that didn't match the sun. The clicking stopped, and in the silence that followed, I understood the final mistake of everyone who had come before me. They thought survival meant staying unseen, but the Snallygaster didn't hunt by sight. It hunted by shape, by the way a living thing disrupted the balance of air around it, and I was standing in the wrong geometry. The first time it truly revealed itself, it did not arrive, it condensed. The air ahead of me thickened, folding inward like fabric being pinched from all sides. Pines leaned, not bent by wind, but drawn toward a center that wasn't visible yet. Needles rattled softly, a nervous sound, like thousands of tiny bones touching. Then the sky lowered. That is the only way I can describe it. Blue collapsed into gray, distance shortened, the sense of above became meaningless. I felt as though the forest had been sealed inside a massive lung and something ancient had just decided to take a breath. The Snallygaster emerged piece by piece, not stepping out, not swooping down, unfolding. Its head came first, elongated, avian in suggestion but wrong in execution. The break and the beak was segmented, jointed in three places, each hinge clinking independently as it opened and closed in testing motions. Inside was no tongue, just a spiraling channel lined with hard, reflective ridges that flexed slightly as if tasting the air. The eyes followed next. Too many angles, too deliberate. They were set far back, almost recessed, pale and glossy but not blind. They rotated independently, scanning not the forest but the space between objects. I realized then it wasn't looking for me. It was mapping how I interrupted the environment. The body descended slowly, suspended by wings that refused to obey physics. They were enormous, yes, but thin membranous planes stretched over elongated supports that trembled constantly, adjusting tension. Each micro-movement altered the pressure around us. My ears rang. My vision narrowed. The smell hit harder now. Metallic, acidic, wet. I gagged and dropped to one knee as the ground beneath me softened, not into mud, but into something elastic. The forest floor had become responsive, reacting to the creature's proximity, as if the earth itself recognized a superior pressure system and yielded accordingly. It did not roar. It vented. A slow, resonant release of air passed through its body, rippling outward in a wave. Trees creaked, loose bark slid off trunks. Somewhere nearby, something alive collapsed without a sound. I wanted to scream. I couldn't. My lungs refused to fill completely. Each breath stopped short, cut off by invisible resistance. The Snallygaster tilted its head, the clicking accelerating, syncing with my heart rate. Then it leaned closer, not to strike, to sample. The beak opened wider and the air around my face pulled forward, as if drawn by suction. My vision blurred, my thoughts stretched thin. I felt lighter, not physically, but internally, like something essential was being extracted through my breath. Pressure left me in a rush. I collapsed flat as the creature recoiled slightly, wings snapping outward to stabilize itself. The sudden release sent a shockwave through the clearing. Branches shattered, soil sprayed outward. The Snallygaster rose, not hurried, satisfied. As if lifted back into the warped sky, I lay gasping, every breath ragged and shallow, my chest burning like I had inhaled fire and glass. Above me, the sky slowly returned to its proper place, but it felt thinner now, as if something had been taken from it, and I knew, with a certainty that made my hands shake, that the Snallygaster hadn't tried to kill me. It had tested the atmosphere of my life and found it drinkable. I didn't leave the mountain after that, not immediately. I should have. Every instinct screamed for distance, for clean air, for places where the sky behaved properly. But something had shifted inside me, an understanding that the Snallygaster wasn't a random terror roaming the Appalachians. It was anchored, bound to geography the way storms are bound to temperature and pressure. I followed the ridge east, toward a series of abandoned survey markers I'd been told about years earlier, brass caps stamped with dates from the late 1800s, driven into stone by men who believed the land could be fully known as if it was measured carefully enough. They were wrong. The first marker sat crooked, half submerged in lichen. Around it, the rock was smooth, polished into a shallow bowl. Rainwater collected there, unnaturally still, reflecting the sky with painful clarity. When I leaned closer, my reflection warped, stretched thin, as if I were being seen through a curved lens. The clicking returned, distant, observing, not moving closer. Further along, I found the remains of a camp. Canvas rotted into lace, tin cups oxidized into jagged shells. A transit level lay on its side, the glass cracked in a spiderweb pattern, that radiated from the center outward. Someone had tried to measure angles here, altitude, horizon, the slope of the ridge. Someone had tried to quantify the air. Their notes were scattered but legible, pages filled with barometric readings taken obsessively at short intervals, diagrams of wing silhouettes, sketched and resketched, never quite matching, calculations crossed out violently, rewritten, then abandoned altogether. One line repeated, underlined until the paper tore. It does not break the rules. It lives and lives between them. That night I dreamed of men standing on the ridge with instruments raised to the sky. The Snallygaster hovered above them, wings adjusting, not attacking, waiting for the pressure to equalize. When it did, the man collapsed inward, their bodies folding as if emptied from the inside. I woke, choking. The air was wrong again, colder, thinner. Above the tree line, clouds had gathered into a tight spiral, rotating slowly without wind. Lightning flickered deep inside, silent and contained. The Snallygaster circled the formation, barely visible, adjusting its wings to guide the storm like a shepherd steering livestock. It wasn't feeding now. It was maintaining conditions. I understood then why the creature was tolerated in old stories, why it wasn't described as evil, only as inevitable. The Snallygaster regulated something ancient and volatile in the mountains. When pressure built too high, when the sky grew heavy with imbalance, it drank. And when it drank too much, the land suffered. The people disappeared. I packed my things at dawn, but I didn't head down the mountain. I followed the marker's eye, because someone had once tried to control the Snallygaster, and whatever they'd done up there, it was starting to fail. The markers stopped just below the summit. Beyond them, the forest thinned into something older and more deliberate. Trees spaced too evenly, trunks scarred with symbols that had been carved not by hand but by repetition. The same shapes cut again and again until the wood gave way willingly. Circles broken by vertical lines, winged arcs, measurements masquerading as warnings. I recognized none of them, yet my body reacted before my mind could. My breathing slowed involuntarily, my steps shortened. The air pressed down just enough to remind me I was trespassing on a calibrated space. At the center of the clearing stood a structure that should not have survived weather, time, or neglect. A stone ring, rough slabs set upright, each one leaning slightly inward like a group of men listening closely to a secret. Their surfaces were polished smooth on the inside faces, scarred and pitted on the outside. Whatever happened here had been meant to affect the air within the circle and nothing beyond it. I stepped inside. The pressure equalized instantly. My ears popped. My lungs filled fully for the first time since I'd seen the Snallygaster. The relief was so sudden I laughed once, shot and broken, before realizing what that meant. This place had been designed to exclude it. At the center lay a pit, shallow but wide, its bottom lined with metal plates fused into the stone. Brass, iron, copper, materials chosen for conductivity, resonance, reaction. Bolts held them in place, hand-forged and stamped with unfamiliar insignias. On the inner wall of the pit, a date had been carved, 1908. I knew that year, the last major Snallygaster sightings, the period when the creature vanished from public memory, dismissed as hysteria, folklore, bad reporting. It hadn't left. It had been contained. The clicking echoed faintly, then, not overhead, but around the clearing. The sound bounced unnaturally, skimming the stones, sliding across the metal-lined pit, testing boundaries. The Snallygaster was awake now. I found the agreement etched into the largest slab, written in a mix of technical notation and blunt language, stripped of superstition. Pressure will be taken here. Release will be limited. The sky remains above us. There were signatures beneath it, engineers, surveyors, one military stamp. No names I recognized, but the intent was unmistakable. They hadn't tried to kill the Snallygaster, they had negotiated with it. The pit had been a feed point, a controlled environment where the creature could drink without destabilizing the surrounding region. The stone ring acted as a boundary layer, a way to keep the pressure exchange localized. But something was wrong. Cracks ran through the metal plates, bolts had loosened, one slab had shifted outward slightly, breaking the symmetry. The system was failing, not catastrophically yet, but enough for the Snallygaster to seek compensation elsewhere, like me. The clicking intensified, circling faster now, impatient. The old agreement had deepened on maintenance, and no one had been here in decades. I stepped out of the ring as the air grew heavier again, my lungs protesting the loss of balance. The Snallygaster wasn't angry, it was awed, and the debt had been accumulating in trust for over a century. I stayed in the clearing longer than I should have. Part of me hoped the stone ring would reactivate on its own, that the old geometry would remember its purpose and reassert itself. But the air continued to thicken outside the circle, creeping inward in slow, patient increments like water finding hairline cracks. The Snallygaster circled low now. I could hear its wings, not flapping but adjusting, membranes tightening and relaxing in rapid sequence. Each change altered the pressure gradient across the clearing. Leaves skittered sideways, dust lifted, hovered, then settled again in unfamiliar patterns. The creature was recalibrating the system. I noticed movement near the fab's far slab, something human and wrong. A figure stood just beyond the stones, partially obscured by shadow. At first I thought I was imagining it, my mind filling in shapes under stress, but it didn't vanish when I focused. It stepped closer. A man, or what remained of one. His clothes were early 20th century, workman's trousers, suspenders, a heavy coat stiff with age. His face was intact but emptied, features flattened subtly, as if pressure from the inside. His chest rose and fell, but the motion lacked urgency, like breathing performed out of habit rather than necessity. He raised one hand, not to warn me, to measure. He traced the air between us with slow, deliberate motions, fingers pausing as if encountering invisible resistance. His eyes followed the movement, focused on gradients I couldn't see. I kept it fed, he said, voice thin and distant. Kept the sky light. The Snallygaster dripped lower at the sound, clicking once, sharp, precise. The man didn't look at it. I volunteered, he continued. We all did. Someone had to stay. Someone had to make sure the pit stayed aligned. Storms don't negotiate themselves. I understood then. The agreement hadn't just required maintenance, it required stewards. Human bodies, calibrated and altered over time to exist in the margins between pressure systems, living instruments, people who slowly gave up density, substance until they could stand where others couldn't. What happens when you leave? I asked. The man's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. It drinks wider, he said, takes from valleys, towns, breath by breath. Above us, the Snallygaster shifted, wings angling downward. The air pressed hard enough to force me to my knees. The man didn't react. He stepped forward, crossing the boundary of the ring without resistance. He was already part of the system. I can't hold it anymore, he said quietly. There aren't enough of us left. The clicking stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. No insects, no wind, no birds. Even my thoughts felt muted, compressed. The Snallygaster hovered directly overhead, and I realized the truth of the old agreement. Balance was never free. It was purchased, paid for with bodies willing to be reshaped by the sky, and the Creator was waiting to see if I would step into the pit and become the next mayor. I didn't answer the man. The question wasn't spoken aloud anyway. It pressed inward, a sensation rather than a sound. The air around the pit had grown unnaturally calm, like the inside of a held breath. Even the Snallygaster remained still now, suspended above the clearing, wings extended in perfect equilibrium, waiting. I approached the pit slowly. Each step felt heavier than the last, not because of gravity, but because of resistance, like walking into deep water that didn't move. My vision sharpened painfully. I could see individual grains of dust hovering midair, arranged in faint spirals around the metal plates. The man watched with professional detachment. "You don't vanish right away," he said. "That's the lie people tell themselves. You stay, mostly yourself, at first." I looked down into the pit. The metal plates were warm now, humming softly. Symbols etched into them glowed faintly, not with light but with clarity, lines becoming easier to follow the longer I stared. My heartbeat slowed to match the rhythm of the hum. I felt my lungs adjust automatically, taking in less air without panic. My ears stopped ringing. My body was adapting, aligning itself to pressures it had never known before. This was how it started. I understood why people stayed, why they didn't run screaming for the mountains when they realized what was being asked of them. The pit didn't feel like a trap. It felt like relief. The Snallygaster dripped lower, close enough now that I could see the texture of its wings, veined, translucent in places, like stretched skin reinforced with something harder beneath. Its beak opened slightly, producing a soft, rhythmic clicking that resonated with the pit. Feeding won't be violent. It would be precise. A controlled exchange. I thought of the towns below, of storms that hadn't come, of valleys that had stayed breathable because someone had stood here and become less than human, more than instrument. The man stepped back, giving me space. "I can show you how to stand," he said, "how to listen for imbalance, how to tell when it's hungry before it takes too much." For a moment, only a moment, I considered it. Then the ground trembled, not from above, from below the pit. A deep, structural groan rippled through the stone ring. One of the metal plates cracked down the center, splitting with a sharp, final sound. The hum faltered, stuttered. The Snallygaster reacted instantly, wings flaring wide, pressure surging outward in a violent pulse. I was thrown backward. Breath ripped from my chest as the clearing exploded into motion. The old system had finally failed, and whatever replaced it would not be gentle. The first thing that failed was sound. It didn't vanish, it fragmented. Noise arrived in pieces, out of order. I heard my own body hit the ground before I felt it. The crack of stone came after the dust settled. Somewhere far away, a scream echoed that I would later realize was mine. The stone ring shuddered as another plate split free, tearing away from the pit and lifting into the air as if pulled by invisible strings. The symbols carved into its surface flared briefly and went dark, like circuitry burning out. The Snallygaster descended, not diving, unfolding, its body elongated as it dropped, limbs extending in ways that defied anatomy, joints appearing where none should exist. The air screamed as pressure collapsed inward, dragging debris, leaves, and broken stone into a spiraling column beneath it. The man was still standing. He had braced himself inside the ring, arms spread slightly, body angled like a turning fork. His form shimmered, edges blurring as the pressure differential tore at whatever remained of his physical density. "This is what happens when the mayor breaks," he shouted, or maybe thought. His voice carried without sound. "It doesn't feed, it rebalances." The pit widened, stone softened, sagging like heated wax. The metal plates bent upward, drawn toward the Snallygaster's beak. If magnetized, I felt my own weight begin to shift, not upward or downward, but sideways, my body trying to occupy a space that didn't exist. The creature's beak opened fully now. Inside wasn't darkness, it was distance. Depth that had no bottom. A view into compressed layers of atmosphere folded into each other like stacked storms. The clicking accelerated, no longer measured. Panicked, hungry, wrong. The man screamed then, sound tearing free at last as his body stretched impossibly thin, ribs visible through skin, pulled taut by invisible forces. He didn't resist. He expanded. He became part of the pressure gradient, his form diffusing into a translucent shape that wrapped around the pit, stabilizing it just long enough to prevent total collapse. He bought time. I crawled away as the ground tilted beneath me, my hands slipping on stone that no longer felt solid. The Snallygaster recoiled slightly, confused by the sudden return of balance. Temporary, unstable, incomplete. The man's voice faded into static. "Run," he said, before it learned a new shape. The ridge began to tear itself apart, trees lifting from the ground as roots snapped free, soil peeling upwards in sheets, fog surged violently into the void, consumed instantly. I didn't look back as I reached the tree line, because something had shifted in the air behind me, and the Snallygaster was no longer centered over the pit. It was turning. The forest did not welcome me back. Trees leaned at wrong angles, their trunks bowed as if the ground beneath them had softened unevenly. My footing changed with every step. Soil alternated between brittle and spongy, like the land itself hadn't decided what state it belonged in. Behind me, the pressure field moved. I couldn't hear the Snallygaster anymore, but I felt it in my sinuses, in the way my breath came shallow, no matter how deeply I tried to inhale. Leaves lifted off the forest floor and hovered for a heartbeat before snapping sideways, dragged toward an unseen axis. I was tracking, not visually, by disturbance. Every movement I made altered the pressure around me, and it followed those changes the way a shark follows blood. I slowed my breathing, forcing myself into stillness behind a fallen log. The air thinned immediately, painful and sharp. My ears rang as the forest ahead of me compressed into silence. Something passed overhead, not with sound, but with absence. A vertical tunnel of nothingness slid between the tree tops, stripping moisture from leaves, snapping branches cleanly as it moved. The fog parted around it in smooth, impossible curves. The Snallygaster was mapping me, learning the difference between panic and intent. I remembered what the man had said, how to listen for imbalance, how to stand. I flattened my body against the ground, spreading my weight, minimizing pressure gradients. My breath slowed, my thoughts narrowed. For a few seconds, the pain receded. The air stabilized, then the clicking returned, faint, curious. It hadn't lost me, it had adopted. The creature dropped lower, close enough that frost formed on the leaves beneath its shadow. Its wings angled inward, reshaping the flow of air around me, creating a funnel that drew my heart upward. I felt myself begin to lift, not violently, carefully, as if it wanted me intact. I dug my fingers into the soil, grabbing roots, stones, anything with mass. My arms burned as the pull increased, the world tilting until the forest hung sideways around me, and something broke the pattern, a gunshot. The sound slammed into the pressure field, tearing through it like a spike. The pull faltered. I crashed back to the ground, lungs screaming as air rushed violently into my chest. Shouts followed, human voices, distorted but real. The Snallygaster reeled upward, wings flaring in sudden disarray. It climbed fast, vanishing into the fog above the ridge. I lay there shaken, staring at the canopy, knowing with absolute certainty that it wasn't gone. It had simply learned that I wasn't alone. Next time it would plan accordingly. The valley didn't sleep that night. Even when darkness settled fully, even when the wind died and the stars tried to pierce the fog, The air hummed with movement I could not see. Every branch shivered, every leaf twitched, not from breeze, but from something adjusting its presence around me. I could feel it. The Snallygaster was studying the environment below the ridge, not just me, everything. The forest, the creek, the rocky outcrops, all part of a living map it maintained, recalculated and reshaped when necessary. I tried to stay motionless, curled against the roots of a giant oak. The ground vibrated faintly as if whispering warnings in a frequency too low for humans to hear. My thoughts fractured. Memory of the man's words about debt, balance, and paying with your body looped relentlessly. Then came the first sound I recognized. A click, not rapid, not like before, but deliberate, measured. A pulse that resonated through the fog. It wasn't coming from above, it was everywhere. I realized then the Snallygaster no longer needed wings to move, it could manipulate pressure and sound independently of its body. Its presence alone warped space around it. A shadow passed through the clearing, folding light incorrectly. Every tree, every rock, every whisper of fog bent toward the same central point. The creature had become a ghost of geometry. I forced myself to move, crawled through underbrush, careful to distribute weight evenly, listening for the clicking that signaled attention. But every step had an echo now, an echo of me that was no longer mine. It had copied my disturbance, and the valley responded. Branches snapped silently, roots rose to trip me, the fog thickened, forming shapes vaguely humanoid, vaguely winged. My body reacted before my mind could. Stumble, fall, regain balance. Pain and fear were irrelevant. The mechanics of survival had replaced them. Hours passed, though I could not measure them. Every time I paused, the clicking grew louder. Every time I ran, the valley itself conspired against me, bending the space I relied on. And through it all, a terrible awareness settled in my chest. The Snallygaster didn't hunt to kill. It hunted to teach, to make its prey learn the rules of the sky, the pressure, the gaps between moments. I was learning fast, but at what cost? I knew by dawn that I would leave the ridge alive or become part of the echo that the Snallygaster left behind. By the time dawn broke, the fog had thinned just enough to reveal the ridge, jagged, indifferent, ancient. My limbs ached, my lungs burned, and my mind still trembled from the valley's distortions. But the Snallygaster was gone, or so I thought. I moved slowly, every step conscious, measuring my weight against the earth, testing the air like a fragile instrument. The forest had been altered. Fallen branches lay at angles that defied gravity. Pools of water rippled unnaturally, and faint depressions in the soil suggested something massive had passed unseen. I knew I hadn't escaped, not fully. Every bird that sang, every leaf that fell, carried its echo. The valley had memorized me. The forest had folded my presence into itself, recording my patterns, my pauses, my panic. I was part of the ledger now, an entry in its invisible account. And somewhere beyond the mist, the Snallygaster watched, not hunting, not yet, but waiting, learning, mapping. I realized that this creature, this impossible predator of the Appalachians, was eternal in its patience. It didn't kill recklessly. It tested, it measured, it shaped, and when the balance broke, it corrected with precision, with inevitability. I could leave the ridge. I could descend to towns and roads, to other people who believed the legend was myth. I could speak of it, write of it, warn others, but the ridge had taken something from me already. A fraction of my presence, my weight, my rhythm. I was changed. And I knew one day I might return. Not because I wanted to, but because the Snallygaster, patient as the mountains themselves, might call again. For now, all that remained was the memory of its wings, the click that haunted my ears, and the knowledge that the sky itself could bend to a creature older than fear, older than time, and entirely unforgiving. Somewhere in the upper ridges in the folds of fog, Snallygaster still moved, silent, calculating, eternal, and I carry the echo of it with me.